Well, Brett, as long as you are speaking, let's just kind of bounce off of that and talk about how, people are consuming a lot of content through streaming services like Hulu, Netflix, Spotify, Amazon Prime. I mean, it goes on and on. It feels like there's a new one every day. So do you think that's going to cause any important changes to how people consume media and what they consume beyond the simple channel or medium?
Yeah. And if it feels like there's a new one every day now, wait till 2020.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I think what's interesting there is 20 years ago, the story might have just been, oh, hey, before the internet, only a couple small set of popular products were available, and after the internet, we made nearly everything available that's ever been made, and so that's increase the variety of what's made. But the truth is, when I tell my undergrads that story, they give me blank stares, because that's really old news, actually. So I think what's actually really interesting now is kind of what I was talking about, is how data is changing this. If you think about what I just showed you in terms of the ability to target countries with content, the same principles is how Netflix targets you with content, or how Amazon, or how Disney Plus will eventually target you with content. And what that means is actually that it's a lot easier. Before we could do this, there wasn't a lot of incentive to make niche content that a lot of people wouldn't notice, but some small set of people would really love. Basically, before data could do this kind of targeted marketing, you really just had to swing for home runs. And maybe you would just take 10 or 15 swings each year. You're going to miss a lot, and if you can get 1 or 2 home runs, they pay for the rest, right? And there's very little incentive to swing for a single, i.e. a piece of content that a small set of people are going to really love. But in a world where we can do what I just showed you, and people can do it better than I can, right? Then suddenly there's a business model that involves making singles or making niche content, right? And we can get it in front of you. We can make sure we know who the audience is, and we can put it in, and we have the marketing channel through the streaming service to actually put it in front of you because we're in your living room, right? So I think what's happening is we're seeing a huge surge of, I want to call it niche content, but that's not even quite right. We're seeing a huge surge of just taking more swings and making content to different tastes. And to some degree, that's like niche content. But actually, what happens when you take a bunch more swings, even swinging for singles? Every now and then you hit a home run as well, right? In a pre-data science world, in a pre-marketing science world, we don't make Stranger Things because we think that Stranger Things is out there for 80s nostalgia, right? And so we don't really make that because you can't make a space for that on NBC primetime at 8 p.m. But if you're Netflix and you can do the things I just showed you, when you see Stranger Things and 15 other scripts like it, you actually take a shot on all of them knowing you can get them in front of enough of an audience to make it profitable. And 14 of them get in front of just that audience, and you and I have never heard of them, or maybe we've only heard of one of them that we really love. But one of them becomes Stranger Things, and it turns out it's not a niche product anymore. So yeah, I think the explosion of content that you're seeing, people call it like the golden age of television especially, I think that's actually a direct result of data entering into marketing science.
I'd like to add.
Yes, please do. So if you pull back, don't forget to put your microphone.
If you pull back from content, I would say 2 profound changes have happened to the consumer viewing behavior. One is, everybody knows this, is guilty of it, is binge watching. The previous restraint and delayed gratification of the TV eras of 1950s and 1990s have fallen by the wayside now. Netflix can create content of a particular series and release, I think, Game of Thrones and release it in one go so viewers can. And the binge watching has become the norm. And that's a profound change from what we used to see it in the past decades. And secondly, I would also, in terms of viewing behavior modification, is enabled by AI algorithms now. All the streaming services have so much data about the kind of shows, kind of series you're watching that they're able to recommend. There was one study done in 2017, published in 2017, that looked at Netflix and other streaming services and found that nearly 80% of the TV shows Netflix viewers watch were all recommended by AI-infused recommendation system. That is now, it's not by advertisement, not by human-mediated recommendation. It's a machine which is now recommending what systems, what movies, what content you'll be watching. And that's a profound change that can go to the positive or to the negative, depending on, right, how the engine, AI engine performs. So something for us to be very wary of, to take note of.
Sorry, that brings up one last point that's
Sure.
not related to data too, actually. If you think about the streaming service model, the subscription model, particularly where there's no ads or very few ads, that actually changes, because the business model changes, so does the actual creativity, right? If you're writing for NBC's 8 p.m. slot, as a writer, you need to create a small cliffhanger every 13 to 15 minutes. And you need to create a big cliffhanger every 45 to 50 minutes, right? And that's really, I mean, imagine how much writers probably hate that, right? And if you're writing for Netflix or for Amazon, you don't need to do any, I mean, there's almost none of that. It's just, you're just writing a 12-hour movie, and you might have actually been told there's already a sequel, right? And that changes the creative playground. And if any of you feel like, you know, content on those services sometimes feels maybe a little bit more intelligent or maybe just a little bit more, you know, appealing, I think that's a big part of it. It's data for sure, but it's also this different creative playground space created by a new business model.
Absolutely. I want to shift a little bit to, oh wait, we have a question? Did you want to, why don't you ask it now? Sure. Yeah.
I know that machine learning is being used in a lot of, for example, allegation of insurance algorithms, and it's actually, because it's consuming past data to do predictive analytics, a lot of inherent biases in data and reflected by, for example, insurance agents today when assigning higher premiums to African American families or whatever it is, they take those biases and then predict them into the future how people should act. So I see the same thing happening potentially for content and media as well, and saying, hey, this is what has been popular in the past and so will potentially be popular in the future. How do we break out of that echo chamber?
I didn't get the last part. How do you break up?
How do you break out of that echo chamber?
You want to follow up? I can do, you know, I do a lot of AI bias, but I want to give Brett a chance.
Well, so yeah, actually, I think Dr. Dorai is actually going to be a great person to answer that. So I'll give a very specific answer in entertainment, and I'll keep it short. The entertainment example, you know, I think there's a much broader point that you're making about AI bias, which I'd like to defer right over here. But in terms of entertainment, I think what you just mentioned is one of the main reasons that I think data science is such a huge part of the marketing of entertainment products, but that we all believe that there's limits to how far it will ever make its way into the creative process, and there should be. You know, Steve Jobs is famous for saying at Apple that market research is only a small part of the story because market research can tell you what people liked before, and Steve Jobs always said, we tell you, we're going to put in your hands the things you're going to like tomorrow. So I think that's really important to keep in mind in entertainment and in other creative spaces. But I think AI bias is a really great topic for you. Yeah.
Definitely, because the future prediction,
Doctor, your microphone.
predictive models are trained using the past data. So the first and foremost is to make sure that the past data is very well balanced rather than data coming out of a certain demographic group or age based on age or gender or ethnicity and so on. So the data balancing, data coverage is obviously a very important one. And more and more people are realizing that. And there are open source software now that's available to check for that kind of biases in data, biases in the results of the machine learning algorithms. So one doesn't put out blindly, takes a bunch of data, push it through a machine learning system, and then out comes the results, and then show it to public. So there is a lot more restraint now in terms of how to analyze the data. So that's happening a lot more frequently.
Thank you for your question and participation. I want to shift a little bit to female representation in STEM. And Debbie, I want to direct this to you. First, I want you to tell us in layman's terms exactly what blockchain is, because no matter how many times I read it, I still don't understand it. Maybe there's some people in the room who feel the same way. So if you could start there and then talk to us about female representation in STEM and your experience working in the blockchain field.
Okay, so blockchain is a digital ledger think of it as you could think of it as a Word or Excel or whatever document you use in, where you can put information in, you can transfer that information. The information that's transferred is immutable to, it's unchangeable, meaning you can't change what you've put in, but you can amend that information. You can share that information with multiple parties across a supply chain where the parties don't trust one another. And you can also add a liquidity value to that information that you're putting into this supply chain. People get a little bit hung up on the scientific background or the technology background behind blockchain, and I'm not going to really go into that because that's a whole other thing. But the one key factor to know about it is that it's not stored on one computer. It's this ledger is stored on a multitude of computers that can be located around the world. It can be located in a central area. It doesn't really matter. But the fact is you don't lose all your data if one storage system was corrupted. So that's kind of the concept behind it. I would, at some point, I think I'd love to really address there's some incredible supply chain use cases being used in media, of course, as well, and tangential to what we're talking about here, but we'll save that. I think, so that's enough of a bite of the apple as to what is blockchain, I hope. As far as STEM, so I think that's more of my background in educating on blockchain has been eye-opening, and I think it's very similar to what we're seeing as far as developing talent in these areas. And the basic thing is people are afraid of new things and things that they don't think they really understand. And so when I just gave that description of blockchain, I didn't really touch upon the technology aspects of it. I touched upon the characteristic aspects of it. So when people say to me, oh, I just don't get blockchain, and I think it's the same idea of STEM. It's this daunting, can we develop talent in this area? Do I have what it takes to develop my talent in this area? And it's like everything else, just take it step by step. And I think that's kind of how we have to approach the growth of talent in that area.
You know, we've been talking a lot about how there really isn't a lot of women in technology. Is it, how do you deal with that? Because I'm assuming that on a day-to-day basis, you're dealing with men more than not.
You know, but that's very common in a lot of industries. That's, you know, in mortgage as well, where I come from. And I think that is more of, it's networking, it's being able to hold each other up, it's recognizing the other women in the room and who are the leaders, and really just when I serve on panels, I do notice if there are other panels at conferences where there are other women, and there are some conferences where there's not a lot of women. If you're asked to speak, you speak, but you also know events where women are not included. So you try to bring each other up.
Absolutely. Okay. Brett, can you talk to us about your experience as a man in the STEM field and how you feel that that media is influencing the way that women have access to the STEM industry?
How media is influencing.
So how do you feel that media influences the access that women have to the STEM industry? From your perspective and your lens.
No, so it's not that I have nothing to say here. It's that I'm trying to figure out, you know, in particular, how media might be influencing it. So let me start somewhere more basic.
Sure.
You know, I run each year an entertainment analytics conference, which is really just a super like high nerd, high geeky conference where a bunch of high-level data scientists working in entertainment, whether in academia or in industry, come together and share best practices. And it's pretty cool, especially if you really like numbers. One of the things that's really important to me is that, I mean, earnestly, this thing needs to be 50-50, men and women. Like it really, like I earnestly want that. You know, I create panels, and the last thing I want to do is create a panel and have it be a manel, right? You know, but the thing is, I do find that it's difficult because there's just, for whatever reason, for a lot of reasons, right? There's not enough women to make in this area to make that easy, right? Or to make that something that I can do. So what to be perfectly honest, the last one that I ran, I think it was maybe about 25% of presentations came from women, and that was stretching really hard, because it is important to me.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so that's the second part of your question, and that's what I was tap dancing around because I don't have a good answer,
I think it's role models. If we look at our movies and our TV and who are playing these roles, it's more men than women for the most part. I don't know if you guys agree, but that's what I think. As portrayed in media. So who are the people that we see in our movies and TV portraying these roles? I don't know.
That's a fair point.
Media often perpetuates these stereotypes. I think one exception is the Big Bang Theory. I did read some statistics about how Big Bang Theory has really evoked a greater amount of interest in STEM, especially in physics. And Pasadena, we are talking about Caltech here. And it was great on that show to feature a woman neuroscientist to balance of Sheldon. If you're one of the geeks watching that, you'll relate to. So I think times are changing. But what we are finding right from elementary school to middle school, it's been the dearth of pipeline. So by the time they reach university, many of the girls have lost interest in engineering and computer science because it is boring. You're sitting in a room, dark room, coding. It's not fun. So we have to break through those stereotypes and other mental barriers that make that. Currently, it's a dismal statistics. I do want to raise one. In the late 80s and early 90s, in fact, computer science degree women were in the 33%, and now we are in the 2019, it has dropped to 18%. So usually, as time goes on, we see progress, and unfortunately in STEM, it's the declining, and we really have to work in concert in many different ways, culturally and educational. Lots of different challenges for us to address.
Well, Dr. Dorai, you're the founder and CEO of AmicusBrain Innovations. So can you quickly tell us what that is? And can you also tell us if you are deliberate in the hiring of females, women, and who you bring on, and if you go out seeking women to join your company and to join what you're trying to do?
Sure. I'll be AmicusBrain Innovation is an AI company. It's an AI technology startup, and it focuses on digital technologies that could reimagine caring for the world's older population that are 65 years old and older. So it's all about bringing the latest modern technologies involving machine learning, data science, and other technologies that would really make care management, disrupt the care management aspects. So yes, of course, always one of my passions is I don't like to be the single, we talked about diva phenomenon and queen bee. I love numbers. I don't want to be a drop in the ocean. I would like to be part of the waves. Therefore, I'm all about mentoring and bringing scores and scores of women. When I moved from India to the US to do my PhD, I thought, hey, I'm coming to the most developed country, the superpower, things are going to be great, because I was one of 9 women in an undergraduate class of engineering among 320 boys, and now I'm in America, so it's going to be. In fact, the first thing that hit me was, oh man, this place is even more dismal than I thought. So where I say is, so this problem transcends national boundaries, so therefore it's really important to me to give back and pull all so I mentored when I was at IBM hundreds and hundreds of data scientists in AI, and definitely in recruiting. For me, gender blind, if you have the right skill, come talk to me.
Wonderful. I do want to get to questions and open it up, but you are also the founder and CEO of your own company, and do you go out and deliberately look for women, or do you consider it an open playing field and that whoever is most qualified?
Yeah, so my company's very small. I don't recruit a lot, but I'm a tremendous mentor to it's women as well as a younger generation, pulling them up about opportunities. So it's both. And when you see a woman, you really do try and encourage her. And I just go out of my way to make sure that I have conversations with people about their careers, because I think that's such an important thing. It kind of goes back to the whole STEM conversation. And it's incredible if you have these conversations. There's a lot of people that are lost, and you take for granted what we've learned over our careers and how you can have an hour conversation with a younger generation person and really help them. So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we've talked about quite a few topics. I'd like to open it up to anything that they've discussed. Any questions? Did you want to say something? Yeah, please.
So there's one topic I want to cover, because I want to connect the blockchain piece to the AI piece in terms of entertainment, and I think we kind of skipped over that. I want to see if I can just put those pieces together. There's two projects that I know of that using blockchain in entertainment, and I want your guys' thoughts about these. Know of personally. One is in India. There's a company that I know that is bringing independent film to viewers there, you may even have some opinions about this, but who have been unable to view these independent films. They haven't been able to get them to the masses. And because of blockchain, because of their security protocols involved with blockchain, they are now able to bring independent film through this ledger to the masses. That's number one. And then the second one using blockchain in entertainment is I'm going to use music as the example, though it can be used in movies as well. And it's bringing music directly to the fans, not having to go through a middleman, by using the blockchain and having the fans buy the music directly on the blockchain, so it goes directly to the artist instead of having these middlemen. You can also talk about, there's a lot to do with royalties in that as well, but I'm just using the actual distribution of the music itself. So these are two big areas of entertainment, just as examples, where blockchain's being used, and I don't know if you guys have comments on that, but I also think those are transformative in and of themselves.
I've heard of the latter project where the London artist Ms. Heap is using the blockchain in order to ascertain the provenance and tracking of how her music is being transported and distributed. So the artist has final control on that. Because of the media being digital, it's so easy to make copies and being put in wrong hands for wrong use. So she uses the blockchain to manage the tracking and the monitoring of how the content is getting distributed and used. The first one I have not heard of it, but I could imagine potentially, given India is a huge blockbuster market of Bollywood movies you have heard of, so perhaps to Beth's point, how do you get this niche content, very specialized content, get into the hands of the viewing public, facilitated by blockchain? So it may not go to the main screen cinema houses, but perhaps through other channels.
Right, it's called Miners Inc., if anybody wants to look it up. But yeah, not endorsing it, I'm just saying it's a good example to look at,
Yeah, you mentioned the offshoot to that too, which is royalties and copyright. One of the biggest problems in music right now, especially with these dominant streaming services, is there's so much music out there, and there's not exactly a perfect registry of who owns the publishing rights versus the performance rights for each piece of content out there. So one thing that leads to is a lot of artists maybe not getting paid. But another thing that leads to is, because that will happen, there's potential lawsuits. And as a result, there's kind of this chilling effect. Like, I might want to sample something and to create some new piece of art, but I'm not sure if I can do it. And I'm not sure where to go to find out who I need to pay to do that. And I can't even create that negotiation. And as a result, I just don't do it because it's too risky. Right. And there's a lot of talk that blockchain is a way of crowdsourcing that problem. Right. And if you can solve that problem, the explosion of creativity, when all of that uncertainty is gone and all of the contracts can easily be worked out, could actually be another golden age of music, right?
Absolutely, no question. Yeah, there's a lot of disputes over rights and who wrote what part. Yeah. So that's all. I just wanted to.
Oh no, please. All right, and looks like we have a question up front.
I do. It's for you, Dr. Dorai. I wanted to ask you. You may be talking about this in the next panel, but I wanted to understand more about how you're using AI in the aging process? Just a little overview of just trying to understand it. And also to that end, over the holiday, I heard over the Christmas holiday last year, I just so happened to hear about how they're using parkour for older adults to teach them how to fall, because when they don't know how to fall, that's when they break their bones. And I don't know if there's something that AI is doing with that as well to help train them so that they don't get injured as much.
Right, I know you're preempting the next session, so
Okay, then never
I'm going
mind.
to
Never
defer
mind.
to the.
Put a pin in it.
Yeah. So we have an hour. We are going to spend time covering that. So just bear with us. Yeah, just in a few minutes.
That's a good teaser.
My question's for Chitra, and it's probably going to be in your next session. What you're doing for the seniors is so needed because so many of the families don't know what to do with an aging parent. And you've touched a little bit on the fact that with what you've developed, families are going to have the resources in a short amount of time to help that family. How interested are the insurance companies in working with you?
Yeah, so I think I understand the question. It's funny you should ask. It's funny you should bring up actually family when you say that. One of the things that you can do with the type of approach that I've been talking about, and I know this because I know of one studio that's doing exactly this with their genome, is you can actually take different elements of the genome, put it together, and come up with a familyness score for any piece of content. And you can decide how family-oriented is this piece of content. So one thing that you can do with this is you can actually, if you think about it, like you sort of think of a studio or a network as like, oh, they know all of their own content. No, they have so much they don't. That's why they actually do this, is so that when Coca-Cola calls and says, in our advertisement, we want a scene that has, people smiling at each other, a sense of well-being, and music from the 60s, so that you can actually go into this database and type that in, because there is nobody who's going to figure that out for you, right? So I think part of the point is if we can tag content with all of these different variables and data points, and then we can create a construct that you might care about, like familyness, or or good feeling, or something along those, or will likely educate people along this topic, and then we can score content along that dimension using what we already have. I think that gives us a leg up in trying to do what you're suggesting.
Thank you, because mine is going to be shown a short film that she wrote, produced, and directed tomorrow on homelessness. Not to put it out there real quick, what the classification looks like, or what we define, we don't think is really an environment. So the idea is that having that, like you say, that area, if we really highlight it, I think basically it's just going to be a matter of giving you the data points that we think would be valuable, and then saying, hey, look at this, what you can do about it. I think that'd be incredible.
If I can add, there's an AI system now which has created a trailer for a movie called Morgan automatically, without what would have otherwise taken 10 days, 10 to 30 days, depending on how arresting, appealing the trailer needs to be. The AI system figured out what you're calling about semantics of the content, right? Mm-hmm. The fear or the joy and the emotional responses that any piece of content would evoke. The AI system is able to analyze the entire movie, pick out section, and constructed the trailer in less than 24 hours. So have a look at it. It's on YouTube. It's a trailer for Morgan created by Watson.
Yeah, I think the big transformation here is that when this piece of content you're talking about on homelessness gets created, if we do our jobs right in AI and machine learning and marketing science, every person who's interested in that, or every organization for whom that could be helpful to make a point that they want, or to show something, right, should be able to get connected to it, rather than it exists in anonymity, or it exists, you know, and gives utility to 20% of the audience that could have gained something from it. So the goal is to get way higher than that. I mean, the true goal would be 100% of the audience that could find value in this ends up connected to it.
Yeah, I just want to say that I thought this was probably, well, for me, a panel that resonated with me, especially because I work in marketing and entertainment promotions. The question that I would ask is, how then do you connect it to kind of creating that next new focus? Because I've heard about various things that we do around shows, but the reality is that where we lead the market oftentimes sets the market, is what I find, especially in the music industry. And it's about promotions and using that data, but there is a bit of steering that occurs, and how do you utilize that yourself, but then to kind of put it to the basics of those here as we look at better marketing, better needs for marketing, marketing through social media. How then do they participate and find someone like you that can help them to figure out how to play in that new space of technology so that it's beneficial to them?
I think this may not be the answer that you're looking for, but I think is probably kind of important. I think one of the first most important parts of this, especially in a lot of industries, there are certainly industries that have captured the value of data analytics much more quickly than others, right? But I think, you know, looking at the startups that I've worked with as well, it's not just big companies, startups as well, you know, honestly, the first step is in companies recognizing we need to start doing this. And the reason that that's difficult is because the people, in many, not all cases, but in many cases, the people who have become successful at those companies have done so based on a set of skills that weren't necessarily data science. In fact, in entertainment, it's gut feel, right, or luck, right, one or the other. I guess they're, you know, indistinguishable from each other sometimes, right? But the thing is, there's still a ton of resistance toward making decisions that way. And while I agree with that resistance sometimes, like, hey, if we only make content based on what was successful, we'll never find something new. A lot of times I disagree with it. You know, when you step in and you can imagine that even just that project that I showed you, I would say about 30% of the salespeople at BBC latched onto that, like, this is a great tool, I want to take into this at meetings. Another 30% had to be pushed, and 30% of it to this day don't touch it because you're not going to let a machine tell me how to do my job. That's just not right. So I think probably the first step here is in realizing we need data science talent in most organizations, right?
Why do you guys think there is so much resistance with such a powerful tool that, you know, companies can really benefit from?
It's the human element. There's no question. I get that all the time, is people are always afraid they're going to lose jobs. There's not going to be a human touch. We talked about bias. So one of the things, I think that's what your answer was, I think, spot on, is that it has to be, innovators have to want to innovate. And so I almost would say you start by addressing, you talk about the pros, but then you have to address the cons right up front and kind of combat them. So, you know, yes, there's bias, and here's how we address it. Or, you know, just because you may really want to be innovative and do this marketing plan, but other people in your organization might not, so.
Trust, I would say trust in the results of any kind of automation, and believe that sorry, I can be
I'll keep
heard.
reminding you.
Yeah, so and the confidence, I would say, that this automation is going to assist me to get better in my job or enhance my job. Both go hand in hand. That's what is going to be the deal breaker in terms of 100% adoption. Otherwise, you're going to see statistics like that, and it's everywhere. Yeah.
My gut reaction to when you were talking about the
Trailer?
trailer was, oh my gosh, there goes a lot of jobs. However, and then I thought, well, that's probably a tool that can be used by people who could never afford a movie trailer maker of that caliber. So you're really expanding the opportunity zone for so many people. So it kind of goes hand in hand. So unless there are any questions, oh, one more. Yep, back there.
Thank you. I was really curious, and I know you guys don't have a crystal ball, but how do you see blockchain and AI being implemented into the real estate industry, and how can we as female leaders be at the forefront of that and kind of, pave a path for our fellow, people in the real estate industry?
So blockchain and AI are beginning to go hand in hand in real estate only because the innovators are using both. So the innovators are, so for instance, I'm on a board that is, basically, if you think about the old term is of a red weld, of a file folder, where you put everything that pertains to that home in this red weld. It can be from how often your refrigerator gets fixed, how often your dishwasher gets fixed, all the data, the stuff from the closing, all the inspection reports, everything that belongs to that house. And it's going into for better or for worse, a digital ledger, a blockchain-based ledger. And so the homeowner is going to be empowered by having all of this information in this ledger. AI is being used on top of that to determine statistics about that home. So this new company is incorporating both of those things into their development. So what I think we will see is we'll see more innovation, putting the two together and figuring out how can we offer products that we haven't been able to offer before. So, and I'm sure you guys have comments, but that's my one example of it. And how can you learn, how can you stay on top of it? It's going to change. There's resistance right now to some degree because people don't always like change, especially in industries that are having other issues or running well or for whatever reason. And so in your role is to stay educated, read about it, stay on top of it. I always post articles about it. My colleagues who are in blockchain and real estate post articles. And so if you just stay up to date on things that are going on around you, you'll naturally have creative juices flowing about it. And then when the conversation turns to it, maybe at your company or at a new company you're at, or at your colleagues at a cocktail party, you'll be able to be part of that conversation and have really intelligent, interesting conversations about the development of it. So that would be my advice. You guys have anything to add?
Yeah, the whole, I would say, the title industry is going to get disrupted very rapidly by the trend I see in terms of adoption of blockchain. Thank you. I thought you just looked at me. So a county in Vermont near Burlington is already adopting blockchain to bring all their county tax records and property records on blockchain. So one can establish the provenance of that property going back 100 years. Right? No, so the digitization is the first thing, but they are even putting it on blockchain so you can actually trace the provenance and the ownership of the property over till the time that parcel of land was carved out. So therefore, I think just like travel agent and travel industry has tremendously changed, title industry is another one. I think in terms of real estate to be profoundly changed altered by adoption of blockchain. And appraisals, so you can see one by one. Wherever you have the records, and now we are paying a premium in terms of insurance and so on, where to prove the provenance and to prove that, that there is no lien on it and so on, all that will be changed by the adoption of blockchain for once and for all. That's certainly the truth.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you to all of the panelists for making this so easy to understand and really digestible and really inspiring.